Imagine standing over an open coffin at a Victorian funeral, leaning in to say your final goodbye, only to realize the corpse inside had completely shifted on its side or sat upright in the dark. On a crisp winter day in February 1879, the United States Patent Office quietly approved patent number 212-273. It was an invention created by a Baltimore resident named James Shannon. To the untrained eye, the design looked almost like a mechanical harness or a set of heavy-duty restraints. But this wasn't built for a prison, nor was it meant for a living human being. It was a specialized iron-reinforced leather belt designed to be installed inside a wooden coffin, binding the dead at the hips and ankles before the lid was screwed down tight. In late 19th century America, families were regularly terrified by what they saw when coffins were opened at the cemetery. Dead bodies were sliding down into crumpled heaps, twisting sideways, or slamming face first against the viewing glass. Was it merely the brutal, violent jolts of horse-drawn hearses over cobblestone streets? Was it a desperate design to thwart nocturnal grave robbers from pulling corpses out of the earth? Or was there something far more terrifying happening beneath the closed lid? Today, we step back into the dark, macabre world of Victorian death culture to uncover the sinister truth behind James Shannon's corpse-holding coffin belt. To truly understand why anyone would invent a seatbelt for a corpse, you have to transport yourself back to the mid to late 1800s. Death back then wasn't hidden away behind white hospital curtains or sterile surgical rooms. Death lived inside the family home. When a loved one passed away, the home was transformed into a place of mourning. Mirrors were covered in black cloth to prevent spirits from getting trapped inside. Clocks were stopped at the exact minute of death, and the body was laid out in the front parlor, which is actually where the modern term living room originated. The logistics of handling a dead body in a 19th century town were incredibly chaotic. Most houses were built with narrow, winding staircases, steep doorways, and cramped hallways. Once the local undertaker arrived, carrying a heavy pine or oak casket up to a second-story bedroom, getting the deceased down was an ordeal. Undertakers had no modern hydraulic gurneys or motorized lifts. They had to physically hoist the heavy wooden box, tilt it sideways, and turn it nearly vertically to navigate tight stairwells. During these violent shifts, gravity took its toll. A body that had been peacefully arranged in a suit or dress would instantly slide toward the bottom of the casket. Knees would buckle, heads would slump sideways, and hair would tangle. By the time the casket reached the bottom floor, the deceased looked like they had been through a physical struggle. Families who caught a glimpse of their loved ones in this disheveled state were often deeply traumatized, convinced that the person had suffered or that the body had been handled disrespectfully. Even if an undertaker managed to get the casket down the stairs without disturbing the body, the true nightmare began the moment the coffin was loaded into the hearse. In 1870s, American streets were nothing like the smooth asphalt roads we drive on today. They were unpaved dirt tracks filled with deep mud ruts, loose gravel, and uneven cobblestones. Hearses of that era were heavy wooden carriages mounted on iron-rimmed wheels that lacked proper shock absorbers, meaning every single bump, pothole, or rock sent a violent jolt straight through the floorboards of the carriage. As the horses pulled the hearse across town toward the cemetery, the casket inside would violently shudder and bounce.
Inside that sealed wooden box, the body was tossed around continuously. Because early embalming techniques were far from perfected, rigor mortis, the stiffening of the muscles after death, would often set in and break down unpredictably during transit. If rigor mortis broke while the hearse hit a massive rut in the road, a limb could suddenly snap outward, or the torso could drop sideways. When the procession finally reached the graveyard and the family gathered around for the open casket service, undertakers were frequently met with horrific scenes. Caskets had to be opened in secret so the undertaker could frantically fix the hair, readjust the clothing, and reposition the corpse before the family stepped up to pay their respects. It was a constant source of embarrassment for funeral directors and a source of immense grief for families. This brings us to James Shannon of Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore in the 1870s was a bustling, crowded city with steep hills, rough cobblestone streets, and a rapidly growing funeral industry. Shannon was a practical man who saw a glaring mechanical flaw in the way humans were buried. He realized that no matter how carefully an undertaker drove a hearse, you simply could not stop gravity from shifting a weight inside a smooth wooden box. On December 28, 1878, Shannon formally submitted his application to the United States Patent Office, and on February 11, 1879, he was officially granted patent number 212273 for his improvement in means for holding corpses in caskets. The invention was surprisingly simple, yet unsettlingly clinical. Shannon proposed attaching inverted T-shaped metal brackets directly into the bottom wood of the casket. These metal loops were situated precisely where the hips and ankles of the deceased would rest. Threaded through these brackets were thick leather straps equipped with heavy metal buckles. Before the coffin lid was secured, the undertaker would lay the deceased inside, position their arms across their chest, and pull the heavy leather straps tightly over their hips and ankles, buckling them firmly in place. In his official patent text, Shannon explicitly wrote that his device was designed to keep the corpse motionless while being carried down steep stairs, riding over rough roads, or being moved by careless handles. To modern sensibilities, strapping a dead relative down like an inmate sounds cold and unsettling, but to a Victorian undertaker, Shannon's belt was a brilliant piece of engineering that guaranteed the deceased would look pristine and untouched when the coffin was opened at the grave. However, fixing messy corpses during transport was only half the reason Shannon's patent gained attention. There was a far darker, more criminal reason why a locking mechanism inside a coffin was desirable in 1879. That reason was the terrifying reality of body snatching. In the late 19th century, medical science was advancing at a breakneck pace across the United States. Universities and medical schools desperately needed human corpses for anatomy classes and surgical practice. However, state laws strictly limited the legal supply of cadavers to executed criminals or unclaimed paupers. The demand far outweighed the supply. This shortage birthed a lucrative black market operated by men known as resurrectionists or grave robbers. These men weren't stealing jewelry or gold teeth, they were stealing the dead bodies themselves to sell to medical schools for cash. Grave robbers developed a terrifyingly efficient method. They wouldn't dig up the entire grave. Instead, they would dig a shaft down at the head of the grave, smash open the top portion of the wooden coffin lid with a crowbar, drop a rope with a hook around the corpse's neck or under its shoulders, and yank the body straight out through the narrow opening. A skilled team of resurrectionists could desecrate a fresh grave and vanish with the body in under 20 minutes.
James Shannon was fully aware of this nightmare. In his patent documentation, he made sure to highlight a crucial secondary feature of his belt. He noted that because the belt was securely anchored to the floor of the casket and buckled across the hips and ankles, anyone attempting to drag the body out from the head of the casket would find it physically impossible. The body was literally locked to the casket itself. A grave robber in the dark would have to dig up the entire coffin, break open the whole lid, and spend time cutting through heavy iron-reinforced leather straps, making the theft far too noisy and time-consuming. While James Shannon designed his belt to solve practical problems of transit and theft, his invention collided head-on with the biggest psychological terror of the Victorian era, taphophobia, the irrational fear of being buried alive. In the 1800s, medical diagnostic tools were primitive. Stethoscopes were basic, and doctors frequently misdiagnosed comatose patients, victims of cholera, or people suffering from severe catalepsy as deceased. Stories ran rampant in national newspapers about graves being exhumed only for horrified families to find scratch marks on the inside of coffin lids, torn clothing, or corpses twisted in positions of absolute agony. This cultural panic led to the creation of safety coffins. Inventors created caskets equipped with air pipes, ladders leading up to the surface, and ropes attached to copper bells mounted above ground, so that if a person woke up beneath 6 feet of dirt, they could pull the cord and ring for help. Now place James Shannon's corpse belt into that culture of fear. If a person was mistakenly declared dead, placed in a coffin, and strapped down across their waist and ankles with iron buckles, their fate was sealed. Even if they woke up beneath the earth, they wouldn't even be able to sit up, scratch at the lid, or pull a safety bell cord. They were trapped in total darkness, completely paralyzed by heavy leather straps. This nightmare scenario haunted the public imagination. While undertakers appreciated the belt's utility, the psychological terror of being immobilized inside a buried box made many families deeply uncomfortable with the idea of stropping down their loved ones. As the 19th century faded into the 20th century, the funeral industry underwent a massive transformation. Embalming chemicals advanced significantly, allowing bodies to be preserved far more rigidly. Funeral homes replaced home parlors, eliminating the need to haul caskets down narrow domestic staircases. Roads were paved, and motorized hearses equipped with smooth rubber tires and hydraulic suspension systems replaced the bumpy, horse-drawn wooden carriages. Because of these advances, James Shannon's 1879 corpse-holding belt gradually faded into obscurity. Modern caskets now use specialized interior padding, adjustable footrests, and subtle contouring to keep remains resting peacefully without the need for visible restraints or heavy leather straps. Yet patent number 211227 remains one of the most fascinating artifacts in American patent history. It stands as an eerie testament to an era when death was messy, unpredictable, and deeply mysterious. It reflects a time when society was caught in a tug-of-war between practical mechanical engineering, fear of nighttime grave robbers, and the terrifying shadow of being buried alive. James Shannon simply wanted to solve a problem for undertakers on bumpy roads, but in doing so, he created an invention that captures the strange, dark, and fascinating obsession with death that defined Victorian America. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. If you found this deep dive into dark history intriguing, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have allowed an undertaker to strap down a loved one in 1879, or does the thought of a coffin belt cross the line? Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.